In this chapter, we will start talking about the heart. And the heart, of course, is part of the cardiovascular system. It's the main organ of the cardiovascular system. And we can say it's a main organ in our body. So the heart, as you know, is located within the thoracic cavity between the two lungs. Its base, or what we call it, the apex of the heart, touches the diaphragm and protected within its own serosal membrane, which is the pericardium, which we will talk about also in this chapter. The heart also is protected by the rib cage, and within the rib cage, it's located between the third and the fifth ribs. Before we start going over the structure of the heart, I want you to understand the two circulations we have in our body. We have in our body pulmonary circulation and we have systemic circulation. The pulmonary circulation is between the lungs and the heart. So we are shuttling blood between the lungs and the heart. The blood coming back from the lungs is oxygenated, and the blood going to the lungs from the heart is deoxygenated. Okay? This pulmonary circulation is short and of low blood pressure. Why? Because of the proximity between the lung and the heart. I don't need high blood pressure there because the distance is not that big. Okay, so this is for the pulmonary circulation. Then the systemic circulation, and this one is between the heart and the rest of the body, in which the heart is sending oxygenated blood to the body and receives back deoxygenated. Okay, so the heart is the pump that is pushing the blood in both directions. Technically, it's pushing and draining, and we'll talk about that, the blood between those two regions, between the lungs and the rest of the body. The systemic circulation, since it's with the rest of the body, it's long and it needs high blood pressure. Okay? Why? Because the heart is going to push the blood far away from it. It has to reach the top of the head. It has to reach the bottom of the foot. So this is a very long circulation. Okay, so now with that out of the way, let's go back and try to understand the structure of the heart. And there we have 4 chambers, 2 upper chambers, and say 2 lower chambers. So we are building it. I need you to understand that we have 2 sides of the heart. This is the right side and this is the left side. Okay, the right side and the left side. The upper chambers, each one of them is called the atrium. So this will be the right atrium, this will be the left atrium. Both we'll call them atria. The lower chambers, also left and right, each one is called ventricle. So this is the right ventricle, this is the left ventricle. Both are called ventricles. So the blood flows always from the atrium to the ventricle. The blood always flows from the atrium to the ventricle, from above to down. Now, the atrium and the ventricles are connected through valves. So I will draw the valves. I will open this space. So here we have this valve, okay, and here we have this valve. The valve on the right side, this one, we will call it the tricuspid valve, whereas this one, we will call it the bicuspid valve. Sometimes we'll call it the mitral valve. Why do we call it a tricuspid or bicuspid? Because the valve is made out of 3 flaps. So if I am looking at the valve from above, like a superior view, for the tricuspid valve, this is what I'm going to see. This is 1 flap, 2 flap, and this is the 3rd flap. Okay, so this is superior view. So think of it, I'm standing like this and looking at the valve. This is what I'm going to see, the tricuspid. Here, I will see just 2 flaps. This is 1, okay, and here it will be the second one. So 1 and 2. So when the blood flows in between them, they will open. They will turn into like this. They will open. And here, you are looking into the ventricle. So this is flap 1, this is flap 2. Now, the function of the valves is to prevent the backflow. Prevent backflow of the blood, which means that once the blood in the ventricles, it cannot go back. So always this valve or this valve, and in general all the valves in we are going to see, this is their function, to prevent the backflow of the blood. So no blood will go the opposite direction. Always the blood will flow in one direction. Okay? Now, we understand now that there is blood reaching the ventricles. This blood needs to go out. So there we have two big blood vessels coming from each ventricle. I will remove this line to draw those blood vessels. The first one, we will call it pulmonary trunk, which is here, is going to come from the right ventricle. Okay? And here also we will have, talk about it in a bit, we will have a valve. So this blood vessel, this we'll call it the pulmonary trunk, which will split into left and right pulmonary arteries. And from there it goes to the lungs. Okay? This one here, this valve, we will call it the pulmonary semilunar valve. Why it's semilunar? Because it looks like half moon. Okay? It looks like half moon, especially when it closes. So this is one flap, this is another flap. Okay, and there is a third flap in the back. So this is the pulmonary semilunar valve. This is also of the same function, to prevent the backflow of the blood. Okay, so here the blood is leaving the right ventricle and going through the pulmonary trunk to the lungs. And therefore, this blood is going to be deoxygenated. In general, the right side is dealing with deoxygenated blood, which means this blood is coming from the body to the heart and going to the lungs. Okay? In the lungs, we have the gas exchange there. This is something we should mentioned earlier. Here in the lungs, we have gas exchange, which means we are going to get oxygen from the air and send CO2 out of the body. So that's the gas exchange. Oxygen in, CO2 out. And then that oxygen will be going to the heart, and from the heart will be delivered to the rest of the body. Okay? So now, later we will see how this blood, the oxygenated blood, will come back to the left side of the heart. But let's talk first about the blood vessel that is taking the blood away from the left ventricle, because that's how we started it. So here for the right ventricle, we had the pulmonary trunk, but for the left ventricle, and I will draw it in red, we have another blood vessel, which will be a challenge to draw it above it. This is called the aorta. Here is the aorta. And this is taking blood to the body. So this is the aorta. Here we have also a valve, also semilunar valve. This one, we will call it the aortic semilunar valve. The aortic semilunar valve. Okay, so now we received the blood from the body, we sent it to the lung, and also that blood now we sent it to the body. Let's see, how do we receive the blood in the heart, the blood that's coming to the heart? How do we receive it? For the right atrium, it receives the blood from two big blood vessels. The inferior vena cava and the superior vena cava. Those are putting deoxygenated blood in the right atrium. So superior and inferior vena cava bring deoxygenated blood to right atrium. Okay? From the lungs back to the left atrium, we have 4 blood vessels. 1, 2, 3, 4. Those 4, we will call them pulmonary veins. Pulmonary veins. Those are bringing oxygenated blood to the left atrium. Okay? So this is how the blood is moving through the heart. If you want to simplify it, you can just focus on one side and the other side will come, because both are having the same structures. Or if you want to simplify the drawing, you can just draw the ventricles. Okay, so you have here, for example, the left ventricle, the pulmonary trunk, and here you will have the left ventricle. This will be the aorta. Okay, so this will be right ventricle, this will be the pulmonary trunk, Here you will have pulmonary semilunar. Here you will have the tricuspid, whereas here you will have the bicuspid. This will be the left ventricle. Here we will have aortic semilunar valve, and here is the aorta. Okay, and then you have the right atrium, and you will have the left atrium. The right atrium receives blood from superior and inferior vena cava, and the left atrium receives the blood from the lungs through the pulmonary veins. Okay, so here this one, just to make sure that we're referring to this, it's not the blood flow. Okay, for the blood flow, I will draw it actually in green because that's the color we did not use. The blood flow comes to the right atrium, goes through the right ventricle, to the pulmonary trunk, to the lungs. Okay, and then from the lungs, it will come back to the left atrium, to the left ventricle, and then to the aorta, to the body. And from the body again, it will come back through the superior and inferior vena cava. Now, the superior and inferior vena cava, the superior vena cava brings blood from above the diaphragm, and the inferior brings blood from beneath the diaphragm. And of course, the aorta takes blood to the body. We already established this. One thing you need to be familiar with is the blood pathway. The blood pathway through the heart. Blood pathway through heart. And this, you need to think of it as a circle. Wherever you want to start, you should be able to come back to the same position. So for example, if I want to start from the body, that I'm bringing deoxygenated blood. So in blue, I will draw the deoxygenated blood. Okay, blood, blood coming to heart. It will come through superior and inferior vena cava. From there, it will go to the right atrium through the tricuspid valve, just one valve, to the right ventricle. Then from there to the pulmonary semilunar valve, to the pulmonary trunk. From there to the pulmonary arteries, left and right. And from there, it goes to the lungs. And in the lungs, we will have the gas exchange. Okay? For the gas, after the gas exchange, the blood has to come back to the heart. So it will come back through left and right pulmonary veins. So this is now in red oxygenated blood. From the left and right pulmonary vein, it will come to the left atrium, then to the bicuspid or the mitral valve, then to the left ventricle, then to the aortic semilunar valve, then to the aorta, and from there to the body. Okay, and from the body again, the deoxygenated will come back to the heart. Okay, from body. You can see it here from. So this is the blood pathway through the heart. You need to be able to complete this circle regardless from where you start. And maybe the best way to show that or to test yourself about it is to try to walk it backward. What does it mean, walk it backward? It means, let's assume that you are in the left ventricle. You need to think, this blood is coming from where? It's coming from the bicuspid valve. And why it's in the bicuspid valve? Because it came from the left atrium. And why it's in the left atrium? Because it comes from left and right pulmonary veins. And why it's there? Because it was in the lung to get the gas exchange. But how it reached the lungs? Through the pulmonary arteries. And those pulmonary arteries got their blood from where? From the trunk, and so on. So if you can walk it backward, it means that you mastered this blood pathway. So those are the images here, like that will show you the different parts of the blood. This is the tricuspid valve, this is the mitral valve, the semilunar valve, the aortic semilunar here, the superior vena cava, inferior vena cava, aorta, the pulmonary veins, pulmonary arteries, and so on. So that is the drawing, or that's the images you have in the PowerPoint. I will stop here. In the following video, we will talk about other structures in the heart that you need to be aware of.